operating system from Microsoft. We will going to start the session in next 2 to 3 minutes. I'm just waiting for others to start on. So once there are a few more joinees have come in for this event, we will start the session in next 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you. Hello all, and thank you very much for joining in. It's 4 o'clock and we'll just start the session with my topic. Now before that, let me just have a quick poll and so that I'll get an idea about yourselves, that how many of you are familiar with the server OS and how many of you are actually deployed as IT manager server operating system in your org. So let me just take a quick look at how many of you are using what type of infrastructure in your organization. So feel free to vote so that I'll get an idea that what infrastructure you're using it right now. That will give me a clear idea that how should I go with the topic, since this event is specifically for the IT managers. So everybody who's joined in over here is managing the IT for small or medium or large organization, and it's a key responsibility to have your IT infrastructure up and running. And then we will talk about some of the key elements that how it is affecting your organization, and next 1.5 hours we will see that what are the benefits and how you can leverage this Microsoft's new server and client infrastructure in your organization that will help you achieve more with less. So I got just voting that around 70 to 75% IT managers have been using Windows Server 2003 or 2003 R2 in their organization. Around 5% of the organizations are still running Windows Server 2000, and there are around 25% organizations who are running Windows Server 2008 in their IT infrastructure environment. Well, that's a good sign that, so those who are already familiar about Windows Server 2008, they will be seeing a lot of new announcements in what's there in Windows 2003 and what's there in 2008. So thank you very much for voting me. So I'll voting for this poll. So I'll be asking such kind of questions over the time so that I'll get an idea that how you are familiar with the event and whether you are okay with the flow. If you have any questions, you have just a Q&A pane. Just click on the Q&A pane and type in your questions. I will try to answer as many questions as possible for me. And on the right hand side, you will see that you have a feedback option. So if you are having some issues with the audio, just select a feedback option so that we can assist you with the settings. So let me just move back to my presentation. Now before starting our session, let me just introduce myself. My name is Aviraj Ajgekar. I am working as a regional site manager at Microsoft Corporation India. So I'm working from Mumbai office. So in my day-to-day responsibilities, I'm responsible for managing the IT infrastructure. So I look after the Microsoft India's West region. So in my day-to-day responsibility, I make sure that all my infrastructure is up and running. There are no downtimes. If there are any issues, escalation, I make sure to correct them or resolve them on time to give the best user experience to all the employees. So this is my blog address, http://blogs.technet.com/Aviraj. So I often write about a lot of IT professional stuff, your servers, clients, the new technology from Microsoft, and some hands-on that I always try to do in my spare time apart from my job. So if I find something interesting, if I find something new, the new documentation, the new technology, I try to put it on my blog so that you can leverage that and you can get to know more so that we can keep you up to date about what Microsoft is doing. So that is all about my introduction. Let's move on to the next slide and we'll start with our session. So just to give you a brief idea that this slide talks about what we are going to cover in next 1.5 hours. So this is basically the overall picture about Windows Server 2008 R2. And next 1.5 hours we will try to see a lot of demos and we will see that how this can leverage into your IT organization, as you as IT manager can decide and you can go ahead and see the benefit that how it can help you save your costs and how it can be helpful for your business. So what this slide talks about, the technology investment areas that we have done in Windows Server 2008 R2. So Windows Server 2008 R2 is a release that builds on the Windows Server 2008 foundation. Just a little brief history. After Windows XP and Windows 2003, we were planning to release a new server operating system sometime later, but then we decided that the overall OS architecture is not that compatible, or it's not that physical, or in a simple word, it's not componentized. So there were a lot of challenges when we actually working with the environment, and let's say if we're trying to build something new, taking any of the components from this OS and keeping it aside, it was very difficult because a lot of dependencies with the overall architecture of the operating system. And then the teams at Microsoft had decided that yes, okay, we will go ahead with the new rewritten operating system, and that is why it took around 4 to 5 years of the development after 2003, and we released Windows Vista, and a year later we released Windows Server 2008 with SP1. So many of you were having a question that, alright, I had deployed Windows Server 2008. Those who are already familiar will be knowing that your Windows Server 2008 comes with built-in SP1. So what is this SP1? So the reason because SP1 was developed after the release of Windows Vista. So November 2006 we released Vista, and then after a year later we released Windows Server 2008. So whatever changes we did with respect to the common components, we have combined them into single patch, and when we were releasing the server OS, we actually added all those benefits in Windows Server 2008. So that is the reason when the server OS was shipped, it was already provided with Service Pack 1. So that OS actually contains all your Vista features as well as the other Service Pack advantages which was there. So now the next up we will talk about this particular slide. So we won't be spending much of the time on the talking and the slides. I'm going to try to cover much of the demos, which will give you a clear picture about, as an IT manager, how you can think about deploying this OS and how you can leverage this overall operating system environment, which is a client-server based scenario, or if you just are operating from Windows Server 2003 or 2000 to 2008 R2. So this slide talks about that. It is an incremental release to Windows Server 2008, and only the second time that Windows client and server releases are shipped simultaneously. So the last time it was happened with Windows Server 2000, and while Windows 7 is available in both 32-bit and 64-bit versions, the Windows Server 2008 R2 is available only in 64-bit only. The reason because nowadays we are scaling a lot to the 64-bit format. You will know that as a server, if you are owning, you cannot manage your entire workload in around 3 gigabytes of the memory. So the barrier is crossed with the help of 64-bit. And along with the focus and simultaneous client and server development, Microsoft concentrated on the 4 key technology investment areas while building Windows Server 2008. And these key areas are virtualization and consolidation. Then comes in your streamline management. Then we talk about the web enhancement, and lastly what we talk about the better together part with Windows 7. Now, while the introduction of live migration, Windows Server 2008 moves into a leadership position in the virtualization market with the same feature portfolio as the competition available in Windows Server 2008 R2 out of the box. The TCO argument for R2 over and traditional third-party software purchase become a no barrier. Now, live migration allows administrators to migrate running virtual machines from one physical host to another in milliseconds without connection loss or service interruption for the connected users. The only facilitates the hardware maintenance and upgrades, manual failover, and the consolidation of workloads on a fewer server. But also is the combination of live migration and Hyper-V and the rest of the Windows Server 2008 R2. So this slide particular talks about what we have in Windows Server 2008 and what is the new areas where we worked upon. So you will find that most of the components were already there in Windows Server 2008, but what we have done, we have improved something in Windows Server 2008 R2. In case of 2008, we already had a Hyper-V environment where you were able to use the hardware-assisted virtualization. What we added in this release is the live migration feature, hot add remove VM storage. So if you already have a virtual machine running and if you just want to add the real-time support for any storage, make sure it's a SCSI storage in Windows Server 2008 R2. You can just use the add storage option and then you can just select the drive. The moment you select a virtual drive, that will be available in the virtual machine without taking it down. Virtualization also talks about the remote desktop services, the new feature that we talked, which is VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, with the help of Hyper-V environment. This particular role goes hand in hand with remote desktop services role, previously what we used to call it terminal services. And with that, you can provide dedicated desktops to all the users who can then remotely log in with on these virtual machines, and we can have a dedicated virtual machine for every user. Then comes in the streamlined management. R2's most profound management enhancement is no doubt the new PowerShell 2.0. The updated version of PowerShell provides a lot of new features and new commandlets available out of the box with Server 2008 R2 and designed with the IT administration in mind. So if you have to perform certain tasks, the scripts, you no longer have to fight a lot with the existing set of tools. With the help of PowerShell and a PowerShell IAC, which is an integrated scripting environment built into the OS, you can actually leverage or control your entire server with the help of the scripting environment. You no longer have to work a lot, and Microsoft has provided you a lot of areas where you can actually get a lot of support from the PowerShell communities or the scripting centers where you can get the predefined scripts for the most of the tasks that you perform on the daily basis. Next up, the AD Administrative Center, the new feature in Active Directory Management tool. Over the time, we were having the same Active Directory Microsoft Management Console to manage your users, computers, and the other objects. But with the help of this new AD Administrative Center, you can manage your entire Active Directory environment more efficiently. Also in the Windows Server 2008, what we have is the best practices analyzer introduced. So if you are deploying some new technology in your organization, if you are taking the decision that, yes, I need streamlined management, I need to enhance the infrastructure, then you always think about what are the best practices when you deploy some server client architecture or the infrastructure management. By that particular time, the best practices analyzer help you cross-check whether you have deployed this particular technology and are you getting out of it the complete benefit. Are you leveraging the overall infrastructure, or have you configured it in the ideal best environment? So though you may have configured the server efficiently, but the best practices tell you that yes, you have done that efficiently, but on top of it, you are actually ideally configured it very well, which will help you in the cases when there is a risk or there is some downfall, your server is down or crashing. So in some sort of scenarios, this particular best practice analyzer give you the complete idea that how you should have configured your environment or what can be done in case you have not followed that particular best practice. And with those recommendations, you can actually go ahead and upgrade your infrastructure. The new power management feature, Windows Server 2008 R2 provides is the group policy based power management. So in case your clients which are not able to leverage or looking after the power management part, you as the IT manager can help utilize these particular features, saving your cost. So most of the time what we see that users are leaving their desk, keeping the systems on. It could be their LCD of the laptop or the TFT is on. But using this group policy based management, you can actually configure the power management settings from the server and deploy them over the domain group policies. Next up, in the web announcement, you will find that Windows Server 2008 includes many improvements that strengthen its position as an industry-leading web and application servicing platform. IIS has a new management console and more integration with Server Manager. It is also configurable from the PowerShell-based environment. So in case you are deploying the server environment in your organization, and if you are planning to use ASP.NET, which is there now on Server Core, or if you want to use the IIS other non-ASP.NET based websites, the complete management can be done through the PowerShell or through the remote server, so which is efficient. Next up is a solid foundation for enterprise workload. Well, now that you're already having the hardware infrastructure, but you will be thinking that, all right, I am using my existing set of servers, but what if I want to leverage more? How can I do more with less? So there are some better stories. So this particular scalability and reliability with solid foundation talks about what's new in Server 2008 R2. So what you will have 256 core support per host. Then you will have, as I spoke to you about the componentization. Now, because of this componentization feature, you can have the server core based environment wherein you are just having the bare kernel OS and the very critical component that you require to run the server. There is no GUI interface and no additional components which could be compromised in case someone trying to break into your system. There is a new support for solid state devices and the introduction of the new feature, what we call the file classification services. So also, when you talk about Windows Server 2008 R2, obviously we are going to talk about Windows 7 because there are some features that you can leverage when you have Windows 7 at the client end and Windows Server 2008 R2 on the server end, and what we call it a better together with Windows 7 story. So there are some features like direct access, branch cache. Now, if you are using the traditional remote access management tools, or what we generally call the RAC, it's very difficult for users to VPN into the corporate environment, and typically it takes a lot of time for users to get connected, and which is very much difficult for users because sometimes if you are in a hurry and if you are not able to get into your corporate environment, and if your standard tools are not giving you that much ability to connect efficiently, they are going to lose time, and this is very difficult for end users to manage this particular scenario. Whereas what direct access does, it takes care of the connectivity on its own, providing you the same security and reliability that you are getting right now from the remote access services. On top of it, the end user who is running the direct access is not required to play any additional role configuring the dialer or the services. It's just you are part of the internet, you are part of the corporate network. And what more you can do, you can manage your group policies, you can play around with the your corporate data, and all you can do is you are part of the corporate network doing your day-to-day work without compromising on the security. When you connect to the corporate environment, you are securely connected with the help of the IPv6 connectivity. You are having the IPsec encryption, which is there between your DA server and the client, which will be securing the traffic. The next step is again the enhanced group policies and the remote app and the desktop connections. This is already there in 2008, but improved in Windows Server 2008 R2. So now what we are going to do, we are going to see each and every technology investment areas one by one and with their feature, and then we are going to have a lot of demos in the coming time, which will help you do more with less. First off, let's start with the virtualization. So virtualization in Windows Server 2008. So there are server virtualization with Hyper-V. Then we have presentation virtualization with remote desktop services. Virtualization is a huge part of today's data centers. The operating efficiencies offered by virtualization allow organizations to dramatically reduce the operation efforts and the power consumption. So Windows Server 2008 R2 provides the following virtualization that we've spoken about. Hyper-V is the Windows Server 2008 R2 is a micro-kernelized hypervisor which manages a server system resources to provide a virtualized environment for operating systems and applications. Hyper-V is the tool designed to leverage more from your hardware-based environment. Now, what I meant by the hardware-based environment, when we talk about the Hyper-V based environment, typically there are certain requirements. And what are the requirements? You need to have at least Intel VT or AMD virtualization supported processors, which can help you use the Hyper-V. If you're already having a server which is not Intel VT or AMD V compatible, you won't be able to utilize this particular feature. That's in simple terms what we call the hardware assisted virtualization. And this is also used in conjunction with virtual desktop infrastructure, or what we call the VDI. And then we have the presentation virtualization with RDS. The virtualizes the processing environment and isolates the processing from the graphics and I/O, making it possible to run an application in one location but have it controlled in another. So in simple terms, what this new presentation virtualization with remote desktop services tell you that in a typical scenario, when we talk about the RDP protocol, which is 6, versus what we have in Windows 7, which is a 7, that gives you a new look and feel for managing or working remotely from the client computers. Now take an example. Generally, if you try to take a remote of a computer using your typical MSTSC or terminal services, we often see that the moment you take a remote of a machine, which is running, take an example, Windows Vista, you will see that the moment you log on to the remote computer, all the arrow functionality or the glass effect is visible, is gone. It's not visible anymore. It gets shifted back to the traditional arrow basic theme. The reason because the graphic subsystem is not that much capable of rendering it locally. So what RDP7 does, it can render that particular graphics if supported by the guest operating system remotely. The entire rendering happens at the local end, and when you take a remote of a machine, you can actually see the streaming movie, you can play with the arrow, you can work with the WPA based development, and many more things are possible with the help of this new feature. So just let's move to the next slide and see the example of live migration. Now, as a new feature of virtualization, we were talking about the live migration. So what is the setup now? We have the centralized network storage. We have this cluster 1. This cluster 1 will be having the virtual machine, and what we are going to do that when we talk about the live migrate my machine, this particular virtual machine running on the cluster node 1 will be migrated to this cluster node 2 without taking it down. So how this happens? So first, when we say that, okay, the user 1 is already connected to this particular node, alright, which is a cluster node 1, wherein we have this VM, and when you right click and says that live migrate now, what actually happens first? The moment it says live migrate my VM, first the configuration data of the virtual machine is transferred. Now what happens with the configuration data? It talks about all the hardware configuration of the virtual machine, like the devices, the processor information, the RAM information, all these device information on the configuration data is transferred to the cluster node 2. Then what actually happens? The actual transfer of the memory pages or the memory content is moved from the first node to second node. Now take an example. Let's say you are having the 100 pages, the small size pages in memory, and you're moving. So how it takes place? First initial level, let's say the 10 pages are moving from this particular node 1 to node 2. And when this particular 10 pages have been moved, there are page number 11 to page number 20 are moving. And while this page number 11 to 20 are moving, the particular syncing is going on with the first 10 pages which were already moved. Now this particular memory sync is taking after that if there are any of the pages which are dirty pages, or if there are any change occurred in the first 10 pages. If there are, let's say, page number 3 and 7, there is some change occurred or some data change, what will happen after the page 11 to 20 have been moved, it is going to seek those page number 3 and page number 7, which are the dirty pages, will move from the main node to the second node again. And same thing will happen till the 100 pages have been transferred. The moment the 100 pages have been transferred, the last step is the control of the VM is been given from the node 1 to the node 2. So user will find little disconnection for few milliseconds, which is not in a second. So if you are using the exchange-based environment, or if you're using some excuse me, high-end multimedia transfer using the streaming media, you won't find, or it's not noticeable change that you have been on the server end, your server has been moved from the node cluster node 1 to the cluster node 2. So this is what about live migration. Another virtualization enhancement in this is the support for the 64 logical processor support. That provides a Hyper-V ability to utilize up to 64 logical processors, And since there are more processors, obviously you're going to get more performance, and you can manage how much CPUs to assign each VM manually with the help of the Hyper-V console. The next step is your VM chimney TCP offload support. So when we talk about the VM chimney, we say that TCP IP traffic in VM can be offloaded to a physical NIC, which is a Ethernet card on the host computer, disabled by default. So this way, this very particular feature helps your IT guys manage and efficiently to see that yes, my server traffic and my host machine traffic and the VM traffic is not diluted, it's not mixed. The VM traffic is separate and my traffic on the host machine is totally separate. What are the benefits? The reduced CPU burden, networking offload to improve performance, and obviously live migration is fully supported if you have full TCP offload. Now remember, there are some points when we talk about not all applications are benefit from chimney. Your application should be having compatibility in order to utilize this feature. And also the chimney capable hardware supports the fixed number of offloaded connections shared between all the VMs. And one of the necessary things that it works best in the environment when you have this long-lived connections with large data transfers. So if your VM is like exchanging a lot of amount of data, then this feature is going to help manage that particular traffic efficiently from the host to the guest. The next step is the processor compatibility mode. Now, this is a very useful feature when we talk about the live migration. Now, often there is a misconception that when we talk about the live migration feature, you need to have the same set of CPUs. Like, take an example, if my server is having the, let's say, Core 2 Duo P9600 CPU or 9700 CPU, and if you're trying to migrate my VM machine, which is my virtual machine, from node 1 to node 2, and let's say my node 2 is having some other processor of Intel family series, you may or may not be able to transfer, but that's false assumption. This particular release supports the processor compatibility mode. So what it means that you have ability to migrate your VMs from node 1 to node 2, even if these two nodes are having a different series of the CPUs from the same manufacturer. What it means, Intel to Intel it is supported. So if my cluster node 1 is having the Intel Core 2 Duo P9600 and my other node 2 which is having the Intel dual core with the hardware assisted virtualization but with a different series, it will still work. However, from Intel to AMD or AMD to Intel is not supported. So this is all possible with the help of this particular feature. So we have this processor compatibility option there in the Hyper-V environment, which will be helpful for managing your configuring your CPUs for live migration. The next step is the streamlined virtualization management, by which of the ways you can manage your virtualized environment. Well, obviously, first thing is if you're using Windows Server 2008 R2, you have ability to use Hyper-V management console. Then that will be helpful for managing, creating, deleting, destroying the virtual machines or playing with the storage. Next up is you can manage that Hyper-V environment with the help of the PowerShell scripting. Now you will get a lot of information over the internet about the PowerShell scripting. And also, let's say if you're having the multiple virtualized server, or what we can say the server configuration, and if you want to control that environment, then what we have, the System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 tool available for managing your complete virtualized environment from one center. The next step is simplified deployment. Now, one of the new feature in Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7 is native VHD support. Now, from this on, we will have our force demo going on my actual machine. So this particular feature helps you create the native VHD files on your computer. Now, if you're familiar with the Microsoft virtualization environment over the time, like virtual PC, virtual server, you will be very much aware that we have VHD as a standard format, virtual hard disk, for installing the OS, deploying, and going ahead. So what we can do, we can actually not only create or attach or mount. So generally we say attach means we mount the VHD file, and we can detach or we can unmount it. But more than attaching and detaching, what we can do, we can actually install the OS onto it, and like Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008 R2. And on the top of it, we can actually boot from the VHD. Now, what is the boot from a VHD? We will see in a demo. So when I say the boot from the VHD, my actually VHD is there on my computer, but which gets expanded when I say boot from a VHD. Now let's move on to let me share my desktop and start with our first demo. So here it is. I will be using so this is my configuration machine that I'm using it. So this is Windows 7. We need Windows Server 2008 R2. Yeah. So here we are on my Windows Server 2008 R2 environment machine, wherein I have to create the new virtual hard disk. So how can we create the new virtual hard disk natively in Windows Server 2008 R2 or Windows 7? So first thing, you will have to go to the computer management. So in the computer management, you are already familiar that we have option to create new hard drive. You can work around with the volumes that you already have. You can create the dynamic disks. You can work with the RAID environment. All that you can do with the help of the disk management. Now to create a new VHD, what you have to do, right click on the disk management, and you will notice something new. You have a new option over here which says create VHD and attach VHD. Now if I select create VHD, I will get a new option for create and attach a virtual hard disk. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new virtual hard drive. Let's say I'm going to put it in a VHD folder. I already have one VHD over here, and let me call it as Windows 2008 R2. You can give any name, that just doesn't matter. For my reference, I'm using this familiar name because I have installed Windows 7 in this particular VHD, which is of around 5 GB, and we are now creating a Windows Server 2008 R2 VHD, which will be a blank VHD. Now the next step is the size. You can create up to 2 terabytes of the VHD file. So let me say that, let me create 20 GB VHD over here. And there are two types of the VHD, dynamic expanding and a fixed size. So what's the difference? Well, as it says from the meaning that when we talk about the dynamic expanding, the disk is going to expand to its full size. So if I say that 20 GB, when I start putting the data or install the OS, it's going to expand to its full capacity. So it will expand 20 GB as I put the data. But other than that, let's say if I shut down the machine, it's going to use a very less space, just the structure of the VHD in a file and no more than that. But if I select a fixed size, which is recommended, it says for little bit performance improvement, it's going to create or it's going to allocate all 20 GB right now on my computer hard drive or on my partition where I'm going to store it. In this case, it's going to be C drive. So if I select fixed size, it's going to take a lot of time because it manually allocates all the sectors on my hard drive. However, for this demo, I'm going to select dynamic expanding. I'll say OK. Now, as soon as I create my hard drive, you'll see that there is a little bit difference how to differentiate between the virtual hard disk and the physical hard disk. So the physical hard disk looks in gray in a color, wherein your virtual hard disk has a bluish shade. So this particular blue icon, the sky blue icon, gives you a feel like this is my virtual hard disk. So what I'm going to do, just like you have connected a new hard drive in your system, you get this kind of option that first you have to initialize the disk or the hard disk, physical hard disk. Same way, when you plug the new virtual hard disk, you have to first initialize it. So I'm going to say that initialize, I'm going to use MBR, master boot record, and now I have some unallocated space. I'm going to say create new space, next, and let's say Windows 2008 R2, and next, finish. So this will quick format my hard drive, and my hard drive should be available for me just now. So it is now given the E drive. So let me just open it. And you will see that on my Explorer, if I go to my C drive, VHD, you will see that it just have utilized around 76.5 megabytes of the space, which contains just the overall structure of the virtual hard disk. It has got no data at all. So this is your hard disk. Now this is my actual VHD file which says the 20 GB, and you will see all the fancy options that you have in a typical VHD. Now here is something funny that we generally do. I'm going to copy this VHD which I just created and I'm going to put it over here. So let's see if it works. Alright, so that's, and now you'll see the size is grown up to 157. So what it did, it has just copied that particular VHD which was there here, and it's again stored in this particular VHD, so VHD into VHD. So that's just a concept. Anyways, what we will interested now in the boot from a VHD example. So let me just detach this particular VHD and let me just delete this VHD. I don't require it anymore. And let me attach my other VHD, which is of around 5 GB. Now this is a VHD that I just created some time back for the demo, which is of 15 GB VHD. And what I have done, I have installed the OS, which is the Windows 7 onto it, and we are going to boot into that particular VHD. So what I have done, to add a VHD, I have to first create a VHD, and using this particular command, that is imagex apply, you can actually install the OS onto the particular VHD file. So this is it. So what I did first, I had used the imagex/apply command to apply the OS onto this particular VHD, and once it is completed, you will see that file structure. And what I'm also doing is I'm using the particular WDS server to deploy the OS. Now, in order to deploy the OS over the VHD image over the WDS, you need to use this particular syntax, that is the WDS util verbose progress and image into the particular group. Now, before going into this particular demo, let me just show you how the boot from a VHD looks like. So I'll move back to this machine. So this particular Windows 7 machine is installed from the boot from a VHD scenario. And you will see that if I go to my C drive, it has got 2 partitions. Now these are from the remote machines. These are the local partitions. This is my actual 15 GB VHD that I just created. You will see that there is 15 GB. And the actual VHD file is located over here. The same VHD that I'm having it on my server. So I have it on my physical partition. So this is my physical partition. And I have installed it over here, the VHD file, and this is this particular VHD. When it gets mounted automatically, when my system boots, it becomes C drive. So to see that, you'll go to my computer, manage, and if I just go to the disk management, you will see that I have this particular physical drive wherein I have just selected the 15 GB of the free space, 20 GB hard drive that I've created, and I have installed the VHD on this particular 15 GB size. So you will see that this particular VHD I'm booted from this particular VHD. So my entire OS that I'm running now is booted from this particular VHD file. And I'm still getting the same performance. I'm still getting the arrow functionalities and all the features that you will see. And if I say that I want to see the preview, I can see that. And now I'll show you how we can deploy the same file over the WDS. So let me just switch back to my server, which is my WDS server. So here it is. When I create the when I create the new VHD and I just install the OS using this imagex utility. Now the imagex utility is part of the Windows automated installation kit, and with the help of this utility you can actually extract the OS from the installer.vim file. Now if you are familiar with the Windows 7 media, you will see that it looks like this. So let me just go back to Explorer. Windows 7 RTM. So this is my Windows 7 DVD, which has got all the files and folders which are required to run the setup. Now if I go to my sources folder, you will see there are 2 big files. One is a boot.vim, which is my Windows pre-installation environment. And if I just scroll down, you will see that I have install.vim file, which contains all these editions: Home Basic, Home Premium, Professional, Starter and Ultimate. What I have done, I have used the install.vim command and I have extracted the Windows 7 Ultimate Edition using this particular command, that is imagex/apply c:/install.vim, number 5 is your edition, and E was my VHD file. Once my VHD is ready with the OS files, what I did then, I used the WDS util command, which is my Windows Deployment Services command line tool, to add this particular VHD image into this installed image. So you will see that when I just see the properties of this particular VHD group, on my WDS, you will see that I have win7.vhd file. Now, this is very helpful when you say that you're talking about the deployment scenarios. Now, in your organization, if you are actually utilizing the environment, I believe that many of you will be using, if you are using 2000 or 2003 RIS, which is a remote installation services. Now, for 2003, RIS have been upgraded to WDS. You can actually upgrade your RIS to Windows Deployment Services, which support a lot of enhancement for providing you the better ability for managing and deploying your operating systems, like your anchor files and servers, new releases of server and the client operating systems. So what I can do more with this, I have created this WDS-based environment. I can deploy my Vim images as well as I can deploy my VHD files. Now the next step is, once we deployed it, let's go back to our demo and look for the next part of the demo. So that is it about the boot from a VHD demo. So what we've seen just now, how we can create a VHD file, how we can install the OS using this imagex command, and how can we add this particular VHD file in the WDS environment with the help of this particular command. And once we have done that, I can install this particular VHD on as many machines I want with the help of this tool. So when I talk about this Windows 7, which is running on a VHD, you will not find any issues with the performance. You will get the same performance as you get from your regular machines. Now let's go back to our next slide, and continue with the next set of our management tool. So meanwhile, I'll just take a quick poll that, did you enjoy this particular demo? So let's try VHD boot. Meanwhile, I'll take a question. Perfectly fine. I hope you like this particular demo. So many of them are saying that they really enjoyed this particular demo. So meanwhile, just let me just move back to my next demo environment. Alright, thank you all for your voting. I got 100% response that you really like this demo. So this will be helpful. So the VHD-based environment is very new to our Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7, which really helps you manage. Now it's very easy. Let's say an example. You don't require to have a hardware to deploy. Just create a VHD file, deploy the OS, and you are good to go. You can just go ahead and install the Windows 7 Professional Edition or Ultimate Edition or Enterprise Edition, keep it and deploy it. It's very good if you're trying to do it on a multiple computers. And on the top of it, you don't require to have any installed OS required. Even if, like what the example that you've seen on my Windows 7 machine, I did not have any previous OS installed. I just had the VHD with Windows 7, just boot record, and that's it. You're good to go. It's good for the heavy deployment, which will save you a lot of time, saving a lot of cost in the heavy infrastructure. So this is good. So I have some question that where can I get more information about VHD? So if you visit technet.microsoft.com, you will find a dedicated section for native VHD support on VHD. If you visit my blog, blogs.technet.com/Aviraj, I have provided a lot of resources and I have given the step-by-step instruction on how to create a boot from a VHD-based environment. The next question is, can we install more virtual servers in any 2008 VHD? Oops, server 2008. I'm not exactly clear with the question, but what I meant that can we install more virtual machines in any 2008? Yes, of course. If you see let me just share my desktop again, and then we will move back to our next demo. I have been running around 3 virtual machines on my Hyper-V based server. So right now I'm having the 2 virtual machines up and running. I can create more virtual machines, and depending upon how much. So the only limitation is based upon your hardware. So you need to have that much amount of hardware and that much amount of memory. So what I meant by that, the storage for storing the VMs, the memory, and the CPU processing power. So let's move on to the next topic. And this is what we are talking about, the RDS and VDI based infrastructure. Now, if you are using Windows Server 2008, you might be familiar about remote desktop and the remote apps, or the RDS, remote desktop web access, RD web access. So what it does, with the help of this particular client, I will be having a dedicated remote app and desktop web access server. So I can just log in and I can just launch an application which will help me connect directly to my remote server. So next, if we say that what more you want and how to make it a VDI based implementation, then you will have first the dedicated remote desktop gateway server, okay, which will be used for the authentication. The next step is, once the authentication is done, you will be redirected to this particular RDS connection broker. Now this connection broker will be nothing but the load balancing, so which will make sure that if there is no adequate load, it will load to the dedicated server. And once you are authenticated against this gateway server, the connection broker will redirect you to either the remote app server or to the Hyper-V based remote desktops. So how this looks like in my organization perspective, I will be having a dedicated gateway server for authentication, this particular server. Then behind it, so in my organization, I will be having a RDS connection broker which will be handling the load, that is my incoming connection. Let's say there are 100 users connecting to the particular remote desktop server. And then in the core infrastructure, I have two types of servers: remote application servers, wherein the users will get only a dedicated application, or if they will be getting the Hyper-V based desktops. Now let me just check a quick link. If I can show you the example of what I meant by the remote desktop. So let me just share my desktop again so that we can go to the next demo. So this is our internally implemented remote desktop services. So let me just provide my credentials. And let me see if I can get into this particular environment. So what we have over here, which says that run the add-on, remote desktop TS client, and this particular field which says that redmondts.microsoft.com RDWeb is our Windows Server 2008 R2 based remote desktop web access, or what we generally call the MSIT TS or the VDI pilot. Now this particular web-based page is configurable. So if you want to put your company's logo, if you want to customize it, you can completely do that. So when I talk about my RDS and the TS, I'll just try to log on to this machine so that once I'm authenticated, I'll be provided with the machines. Now here's an example. So what I have over here, I have VDI pool wherein I'll be having a lot of virtual machines I can log on to, or I have these remote applications. Now what are these remote applications? So the moment I click on to any of the application, let's say Remote Excel, it is going to provide me options that what I have to do. So this is basically logging on to, and I will say connect. So it will try to connect to the remote application server, which is my redmondtac.redmond.com.microsoft.com. It is trying to authenticate, and upon the successful authentication, I'll be getting the complete Excel interface. I won't be getting the complete desktop, I won't be getting the start menu, the desktop, but the complete Excel, only the Excel I can use. So that I meant by remote applications. Same way with the Adobe Acrobat Reader. Now let's take an example. Let me go to my remote desktop and say that, let me try to connect to one of our servers. So in this particular case, if I try to connect, so this way it provides me to my local server. So this way I can connect over the web. So I was part of the internet. I just logged on to this particular TS gateway. I just provided the computer name that I want to connect, and I'm over here. So this is what I meant by the remote desktop VDI based infrastructure. You get a dedicated desktop for yourself or for your employees. They can leverage it. They can play around with it. If something goes wrong with that virtual infrastructure, what you just can do, just replace the VHD file, get it back from the server farm, and you're up and running. You don't have to worry about any rebuilding, like how you have to spend time and the cost on fixing up the actual physical hardware and the reinstallation. Since this is a virtual environment, just one click and you get all the VHs back into its place over here, and the user gets his machine back. So the next step is what we talk about the management part. Now in management, we will talk about the power management enhancements in Windows Server 2000 and R2, the streamlined administration, again the PowerShell remote scenarios, PowerShell graphical user interface, how we can use the PowerShell scripts against these regular scenarios like your daily routine, and Active Directory management infrastructure. Now, Active Directory is a key component, and this plays a very critical role when we talk about management part. So the best practice analyzer is what we just talked some time back. First up, power management. Now this is a new feature, core parking. You will see that I am having a dual core processor. In general case, I am having around 4 cores in my single CPU, and generally I will be having around 10 to 20% load in each and every CPU. So what the core parking does, that when I sense that I don't have enough amount of load, all right, and instead of providing the actual power connectivity or the power consumption is happening by all the 4 cores, no matter whether you are using the CPU or not, there is a constant power consumption. So how to reduce it? So take an example, on the weekends when the employees go home, there is no workload. In that particular scenario, you can actually take these 3 CPUs, CPU number 1, 2 and 3, and have them into the sleep mode. So they won't be consuming any power, and all the load will be there on the processor core 1. That means these 3 CPUs, 1, 2 and 3, they won't be consuming any power. So that is what we call the parked core. So once the core is parked, there won't be any consumption, and as soon as it senses any load, it will start using that particular all the remaining CPUs depending upon how much work is there. And this is all automated. You don't have to spend a lot of time onto it, and you don't have to manually do it. The load management takes care automatically. And the best part is that this particular this core this management is now supported in the upcoming hardware provided by Intel and the AMD. So the newer i7 series CPUs now utilizes this particular feature. Now again, Windows Server 2008 R2 has the ability to adjust the processor performance, or what we call the P state, and subsequently adjust the server power consumption. Depending on the processor architecture, you can configure how P states are adjusted using the group policy, giving you very fine and the granular control on the power consumption. The next step is your this particular SAN-based scenario, wherein Windows Server 2008 supports the ability to boot from a storage area network. Now, what it means that you will be having all the VMs running on the SAN, and which eliminates the need for a local hard drive in the individual server computers. And the performance for accessing the storage or SAN has been greatly improved in this particular release. So this way it saves a lot of power consumption in your organization, and how we think in a future perspective, this overall power consumption, lower power consumption, help you save more cost in your day-to-day work. Now you may find that how much cost I'll be saving, but if you try to calculate it over the year, that how much amount of power consumption that I'll be having it's quite a lot. And same way, automatically, if we talk in the back environment and how this energy is produced, we again talk about the carbon emission, the carbon footprint, that is again reduced. And subsequently, this is one of the solution towards the green IT. So over the time, what we see in the virtualization enhancement and this improved management with all of the power management capabilities, these to contribute towards our environment sustainability, or what we generally call the green IT. Well, obviously, let's say you are running 100 servers in your environment. So 100 servers, physical servers, are consuming a lot of energy, versus you are trying to use the 10 servers and consuming loads. You are not using the energy for the 90 servers, you are not using the actual space for 90 servers, and you are not spending that much amount of management and the money on those particular 90 servers. Everything is happening on those 10 servers, and you are just centrally managing it over the tools that you have provided with. Some of the new enhancements in the console, Server Manager is improved. We will see Server Manager in the upcoming demo. Active Directory Administrative Center for easy user management. Let's say you have to reset the password. It's just one click and you can reset the password. IS Manager, it leverages the capabilities provided by PowerShell. And again, as we spoke about the Hyper-V, which is a very efficient way of managing your environment. So the next up is your Active Directory identity and management. So let's say that first we will talk about this particular feature, and then we will see some of the 3 to 4 demos that talks about the remote desktop enhancement, server manager, PowerShell, and Active Directory, and lastly the best practices analyzer. So what we have in this particular release, we have Active Directory server role enhancement, the new forest functional levels. Well, if I just ask you a question that how many of you are, as IT managers, face this challenge that sometimes your IT guys have trying to do something with the Active Directory and you have deleted the object by mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, and how much it was difficult to restore that particular object with the help of the backup tapes and all. So what we have introduced is a new feature, what we call the recycle bin. So with the help of this recycle bin, you can actually restore those objects without looking after or running around those backup tapes. The new forest functional levels provide all the necessary enhancement which was supported in 2008 R2. The new PowerShell-based management, you can manage your entire Active Directory-based environment with the help of the PowerShell that we will see in some time. And again, a dedicated system center management pack for the Active Directory. Lastly, there are some enhancements such as offline domain join. So in case you are having some employees working remotely and let's say they want to rebuild a machine. So what you can do, from your main location, you can build and capture an image with all the necessary domain information, put them in a Vim, compile a custom installable with the help of the Windows Automated Installation Kit. So this custom installable will be having the OS as well as the other user information and the domain information. You ship it to the users, they will try to install it with the OS, they will install the OS, and automatically the domain information will be added. Now let me take a few questions that I'm getting some questions from the users. So before going to my next demo, let me answer some of the questions. Can we schedule the core parking? That is, it should park on a Friday evening and unpark on Monday morning. Well, of course, you can manage the core parking. It's completely into your hand. On the top of it, the only part is that you have to configure the core parking. When you talk about the unparking, you don't have to worry about it. Automatically, when there is a load, it will sense the load and the CPUs will be alive on its own. You don't have to worry about manually. So if you are assuming that, let's say if my CPUs have parked and there is no power consumption, and let's say that all of a sudden there is a lot of load. So do I have to do it manually? Of course not. Once the load is sensed, the CPU, the system takes care all the management on its own, and it will wake up those cores, and the cores will be actually processing all the information. So let's move back to the next slide and talk about the best practices analyzer. Now, before going to the best practices analyzer, since we are already talking with the Active Directory enhancements, and let's see some demos, and then we will move back to this particular demo. So the first thing, we just seen the RDS demo, RD Web Access. Now, just one thing to clear with, initially we used to call it terminal services. Now, terminal services have been renamed as remote desktop services. So just keep in mind that when I say RD, it's basically a TS. So what demos we are going to see now, we will talk about the RDP7, what is the enhancement in remote desktop. Now, take an example. I'm having a client running, I'm having a virtual machine running Windows 7. Now, obviously know that if I take this control of OS running Windows 7, everybody knows who is using Hyper-V that when I talk about the Hyper-V, it's basically just taking a remote and let me just log in. I know because I have shared my desktop, it will be a little bit slower on your computer when you're watching this webcast. So I'll just go a little bit slowly. You will see that I'm not having the glass effect. I'm not having the arrow. If I try to see the preview, I don't see the preview. So the reason because there is no arrow enabled in this, because I'm using a traditional Hyper-V based remote connectivity option, VM Connect. But let me just switch back to our MSTSC, which is a remote desktop connection. And what we have over here, I can select the display what I want. I can select max. I can select the local resources. I can say that in the audio case, use my record from my physical computer from which I'm taking a remote, and play it on the remote computer, which says play on a remote computer. And I'll say okay. If I click on the program, I can select the program. In the experience, you will see that I have something new. I can select what I want. I will keep the desktop wallpaper as it is. I want font smoothing. I want desktop composition. I need a visual style. So in case, let's say, let me just adjust my connectivity as, let's say I'm using the high-speed broadband, so automatically it adjusts the particular option. Let's say I'm using the WAN or the high connectivity in my corporate environment, and if I want to connect, I will say connect. So this gives me an option that do you want to share the drive, the clipboard, the printers, the ports, the plug-and-play devices, audio recording. I'm going to say connect, yes, use that. And once I provide my password of that remote machine, I'll say okay, and it will try to connect to the computer using this MSTSC console. Now let me just maximize it, and once I'm done that, you will see that, see, now I'm having my aero glass enabled. I can see the glass, I can see the transparency, I can even see the preview, same way like generally we see. I can even use my desktop composition features like Aero Peak to see. So everything is possible on the same VM, but with the help of this new MSTSC client, or what we call the RDP7 enhancement. So let's move back to my next demo. Yeah, this is what we've seen. So let me just close this and connect to my remote machine. So this is my another machine or my server, which will be, I'll be demoing the next feature, which is server manager and Active Directory recycle bin. So let me just log in with the credentials. And what we're going to do before going to the particular demonstration, we will start with some enhancement in Server Manager. So I will switch back to my domain controller. So let me just give you some feel about the machine that I will be using. DENDC01 is my domain controller. And let me just log on to my domain controller. From this background information, you will get an idea that what OS I'm using. So, all right. And before that,
please pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press *1 now, or the conference will be terminated.
add the particular VM that I required for this demo. So I'll say insert disk, D drive, tools, demo files. Yeah, it should be up. So first thing when you click on it, you click on the server manager and you will see that the new and improved server manager. Now server manager is a tool for those who have been not using Windows Server 2008 or who are still using 2000 or 2003. Server Manager is a new management tool from which you can manage your roles, features, services, configuration and storage, all diagnostics, all from one place. Now, if I just click on the main Server Manager, I can see the summary of my computer and what the particular task that I perform on this particular server role, server machine. And lastly, some resource and support like customer experience improvement program. If I click on my roles, I can install new roles, I can install new features, I can play with the diagnostic tools, which contains a lot of like device manager, event viewer, and all those information. And later on, if I want to add, let's say, take the backup or add the disk, I can use the storage option. So same way, I am having this one particular console to perform my all the day-to-day basis tasks from one location. I don't have to open any console again. So this is my server manager with my roles, my features. Now in the features you will see I have configured a lot of features and event viewer, system resource manager, everything you get in one particular box. So you are controlling your entire server from this one box. And let's say if I want to connect remotely, I can say right click, say connect to a computer, give the server ID and I can manage that server remotely. Now what I'm going to do that, we will going to see the demo of Active Directory Recycle Bin, but before that, let's launch our PowerShell IC. So what I'm launching now, PowerShell Integrated Scripting Environment. So those of you who are not familiar with the PowerShell, this is our PowerShell which is available from the previous releases of the operating system. I can use, let's say, get help command to start with. I can use clear. I can use get child item, which is nothing but the dir command or the ls command. But when I actually use ls command, it says that when I actually type ls, it's actually calling the main definition. That is a get child item. So what I'm going to do, and this is my extension, or what we say, PowerShell Integrated Scripting Environment. So before I start with my demo, let me just import the script that I will be playing. So here I'm going to see the this particular output of the command. Here I can open my .ps file, and here I can type my any custom command that if I want other than what we see. I can see the output over here. I can type clear. So if you are for the developers, when we talk about the scripting or integrated environment like the IDE, integrated development environment like Visual Studio, how Visual Studio is helping them for managing their work. Similarly, PowerShell scripting is helpful for us for managing our environment. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use import Active Directory. So what it does, it actually calls the Active Directory related commands that I can use now in the PowerShell. So once I import my Active Directory, in order to enable my Active Directory Recycle Bin feature, first of all I have to select the particular feature. I can click on this Run Script button, and this says that Get AD Optional Feature. Now as of now, this particular feature, I'll say yes to all. The Active Directory Recycle Bin feature is not available. Yeah, the Active Directory Recycle Bin is available for us, but you cannot manage it with the help of the graphical user interface. So it says that we have this particular feature, Recycle Bin feature available, and we can use that. So it says that enabling Recycle Bin on this particular, let me change the view. Enabling the Recycle Bin is a irreversible action. So once you enable it, you cannot disable back. So that's the requirement. Now, let's say that let's enable this, we already enabled this feature, and next up is let's try to play with the particular object. Now, if I go to my Active Directory domain services, users, and computers, let me just go to the computers, and let me just try to delete this particular computer account. And since say that use delete subtree server control. Now if I delete this, the only way of, let's say, restoring it is by managing or collecting my authoritative restore or the backup tapes and all that long process, or other option is like, you know, get my server rejoin to my domain so that I can get all that computer information. But now imagine this particular server that I just disconnected, this particular SR01, imagine that if server is having around 100 users connected, and let's say taking this machine down and rejoining domain, that means I'm going to lose hundreds or thousands connected connections breaking off. So not a feasible solution now in this particular scenario. So what I'm going to do, we will use the Active Directory feature, Recycle Bin feature, and we have this command which says that get AD object search base selected objects from woodgrewbank.com. I'll use the LDAP filter, that is I want the computer, last known parent, and the format list. So the format list will give me the list of all the features, all the available deleted objects. So I'll set F8, and what it does, it is giving me the available computers which were deleted, or the objects. So that I select this command that get AD object search base, search in the common name deleted objects, domain controller, woodgrewbank, and the format list. And I know that, oh yes, this is what I want. In fact, the subtree is all the information I have, including object ID and object class. Now the next option is I have to restore it. So again, I'll be using the same particular command, But instead, the last option, I will say that AD restore object. And when I'm running this particular command, I don't get any message. That means it successfully restored it. And let me just go over here and say that refresh, and I have it over here with all my information intact with this particular computer. So this way you can restore your objects which were deleted accidentally. By default, this feature is not enabled. You have to enable this feature manually. Same way, if I want to if I delete any more objects, I can use them like objects by objects. If I select other objects, I can select it. Instead of using just a computer, I can use something else. Like if I select this particular option, object class star is equal to star, that means I'm going to list all the objects but not just computers. Here in this particular example, it is just looking for the object which is of computer type. If I give you a star, it's going to give me the list of all the deleted users, computer and other objects or the OUs. So that is about Active Directory Recycle Bin as a PowerShell integrated scripting environment. So let me just try to use some more commands with oops, it's not okay, let me just try this get AD forest. So yeah, so this particular command, that is what I just typed, AD forest, is I'm able to execute this particular command because I am imported my Active Directory module for PowerShell. Now with this particular command, I can get a lot of information, and there are so many commands you will find which are useful for managing your Active Directory based environment using. I can also use get AD domain so that it should give me all the information about the current domain. So same way, you get all the information about this particular domain like in one click. So in case you are having the PowerShell, so this is useful if you are using a server code based environment and if you want to use that particular feature of PowerShell. Then next up we will talk about the Active Directory Administrative Center, which is a new tool for managing your Active Directory based infrastructure. So what I'm going to select that Active Directory Administrative Center. Let me just open my other virtual machine file to get me the required user to. So it is AD Recycle and AD Administrative Center. So we just copy it. Alright, let me just share my desktop again. So there I should have minimized. So what I did actually, I had some demos pre-configured over here, and I have this particular example where I'm going to use this particular account to restore the data. So let me just copy it, and on my particular domain controller, okay, this is how my Active Directory Administrative Center looks like. I can select that domain and the username. Okay, one second. I'll be using type. So it should paste the data. Okay, this is good. And let me just press tab. So it says that automatically I got a tip that the password will be reset for this particular account. So let me just put the password at Windows #1, Windows #1. And if I want, I can select that the option is apply. So the password for the XYZ user has been reset successfully. So this way, this is a small option where I can reset the password. If I just drill down in my Woodgoo Bank domain controller, I can use this particular arrow to expand the required domains. Let's say America. In that, I'll go to say Washington. Let's say Kings and let's say Redmond or any other place. I'll just double click so that it should give me all the list of the users. Yeah. So what I can do, I can actually manage my entire Active Directory based environment by just one click over here. So which is now again easy than your traditional way of using the same thing with the help of the Active Directory. Now this is very helpful if you're having a lot of records and the management is very difficult, and if you're just trying to perform some certain regular tasks like resetting a password, this is a very useful tool. And you can like search globally from this particular domain list that what you have to do and how you want to play around with it, which users you want. So the same way, let's try to search this particular user again, and let's try to type a clipboard. Oops, I'll type it over here. All right, so let me go to the users. Or we just check in our main demo script that which user we can test to see additional options. So we have okay, we can see actually this particular. So I'll be using this particular path where I have Americas, I have Washington, Kings, and yes, over here. So here I'm having some users, and what I can do, I can just say right click and see the property for the users, and this will give us the new pane, which is providing me the list of all the properties of the user that I can change or modify. Same way how you do it in your Active Directory Management Console. So same way, same tabs over here, you can configure it from this place. And if you just don't want certain tabs, you can just close them. Like I don't want this tab, I will say that I don't want the profile tab, I just want this member of tabs. If you wanted to just add additional tabs, you can select add sections and add them quickly. So that is about the Active Directory Administrative Center. Let us go back to our presentation. So that generally talks about the streamline management, which is helpful for you. The next is the best practices analyzer, which validates your configuration. So how you have configured the environment with respect to your organization. And before going to the web, we will just see a quick demo of it. Meanwhile, let me just start the other server for the server code demo. And let me share my desktop. So what I'm going to do, in order to show the best practices analyzer, we will use a role in my server manager. And when I click on the roles, I will see all my available roles. Let's say Active Directory Domain Services. And when I click on the particular role, I'm going to get all the information with respect to that particular role information. And along with that particular role information, I'm also going to get some additional options to perform the tasks like your adding new server role feature, configuring the server role feature, services related to the feature, executables related to the features, and also if I want to use the best practices analyzer to scan the role. So just loading. Meanwhile, let's try to do this on my main machine. Meanwhile, let's have some questions from your end while it is loading the demo. So I have one question that can we print directly to a printer while we use the remote Excel? Yes, of course. When I use the remote Excel or any remote applications, I have ability to use my local resources like my printers and other hardware devices. So if I give print, I can print locally. Someone is asking one more question that recycle bin cannot be used GUI, right? Yes, perfectly right. As of now in this release, we don't have the graphical user interface available for the same. You have to use your PowerShell based environment to manage this particular scenario. Let's take a few more questions and then we will continue with the best practices analyzer feature. Okay. Hyper-V can be installed on Windows 2003. No, Hyper-V is a feature of Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2. So you need to have hardware-assisted virtualization and any of the server OS to use this particular feature. Let's take one more question. So can I have the recording? Yeah, we will be having the recording once we have done with the session, so you can just download and you can see the particular webcast again in your free time. So can we use audio and video drivers from client machine to use WinATS from a different computer? Yes, that's what I just demonstrated. When I just taken the remote of a Windows 7 machine from my physical machine, I am actually using my local audio and video for rendering. So basically what the graphical user interface that you see, that is a glass effect, arrow effect, the entire rendering is happening on my local computer. So that's about the Windows Server 2008. And let's just move on to the next part, which is our best practices analyzer. For that, let me share my desktop again. And if I just go to my role, you'll see that I have the Active Directory domain services and all the information about it. And if I just say that scan this particular role over here, best practices analyzer, it's going to scan the role, and once it has completed scanning the role, it's going to give us an output that did it find how we configured the role very well or something we missed. So if we have missed something, it's going to give us the suggestion that you have implemented this particular technology or this particular Active Directory configuration in XYZ format, but you have to make it in this particular efficient way. So meanwhile it is happening, let's move back to our next part of the demo. That is our web enhancements. Let me check my presentation. Yeah. So when we talk about the presentation, there are some new enhancements in IIS 7. We have IIS 7.5, the streamlined management with the expanding IIS manager, very easy to manage troubleshooting, the support for IIS 7.5 services, extensible architecture, and along with that you have the easy management. So what you see in this IIS is more reliable, more secure, more control in your hand, and more choices. So you can actually build your ASP.NET based websites along with the PHP support with this particular new IIS. And also when you talk about the IIS, you get the new features like the new IIS configuration manager, IIS extensions, PowerShell based management, and the best part is the IIS on the server core. So that's something new that you will find. Also in the reduced troubleshoot effort, you find the failed request tracing for fast CGI and the best practices analyzer, again the same way. So let's just go back to our IIS demo and see that how we can use this IIS 7.5 on the .NET based server core. So let me just share my desktop again and we'll continue with this demo. So I have this computer running server core, so let me just connect it. Let me just take the particular computer name that will be using this for this demo. So this is it. Alright, so this is the computer name that we require. Now you are already familiar that since we are actually using the server core, we are not having the access to the commands. So this is what we have in order to manage the server. So what I'm going to do, I will go to my particular server domain controller, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say right click, and or let me just launch IIS manager from this place, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that connect to the remote machine. So in my connections option, I have option that connect to a server. I'm going to say that DENCORE/01 is my remote server. This is my username and my password. I'll say next. And what it will do, it will try to connect to my server core based machine, which is my non-GUI based machine. Close. so that I am able to manage my server core based environment from a website. Now, meanwhile it is connecting, let me show you what is server core based environment looks like. On a server core, you just get nothing except this command prompt. If you just try to open a notepad and if you see that file menu option, you will see those typical in Windows 3.11 how you used to see the options that way, because it is not having any libraries or graphic subsystems for any type of graphics. So I'll say connect. So we are back onto our domain controller to manage the server. So connection is successful. I'll say OK. And once I'm done, you will see that I'm getting something else along with my traditional, my typical this domain controller. I'm seeing my complete IIS configuration from my domain controller. And in order to launch a website, I'll go to the Internet Explorer. And let me just launch a easy website by typing this particular web address, http:// den code 01. So this is my web server core based server running IIS 7.5, and I've just created a demo website that I'll be just launching, and here it is. So this is I'm running from my client, and I'm managing it from my Windows Server 2008 R2 GUI based environment. So this is how you manage your server core based environment. So I hope that you enjoyed this particular demo. Let's move back to our presentation and complete the few last set of tools and technologies that we are going to have. So these are some of the announcements that you will see in the release to web or the beta releases or the subsequent releases. You will see the detail when we share the text once we are done with the session. So solid foundation for enterprise workloads. We are going to talk about the performance and scalability improvements, file classification infrastructure, payload clustering, briefly storage performance, the backup and recovery, and so basically your physical server now supports up to 256 logical processors, logical cores on the physical machine. You have a reduced overhead with the help of this server core. And what more, you can actually have the high storage performance with the help of this particular option. The next up is your cluster migration. So what you can do, you can migrate your clusters running Windows Server 2003 or 2008 based environment, or if you're already having the existing set of clusters that you can use them to manage. So the new high availability role, the new cluster shared volume, which is a new way of storing your virtual hard disk, what we call the LUN, logical unit. And on this LUNs or the CSUs, you can actually deploy your virtual hard disk, which can be booted up from SAN on the virtual on the different nodes, and which are very helpful in case of your let's say cluster fault tolerance option, or if you have some link down. So in case let's say I am having a SAN configuration as my SAN connectivity failure, I can use my alternate connectivity or my redirected IO via network, and my VHD is still up and running even if my physical box is down. I can still have it mounted on my node 1 because my VHD, which is my virtual machine, is stored on the SAN. So in case of the SAN connectivity failure, I can use this option. Next up, same way that another node fault option, if my let's say node gets failed, I have a manual relocates to a new healthy node, which is my VM VM running on a node 2, again which is there on my VHD. And in case my network fault tolerance, my network goes down, I can try the redundant WAN link routed through my second node, and I can get my VHD up and running. And in case of my storage performance, because in this particular slide we talk about the multipath IO, so any of my existing path fails, I can use the alternate path to connect to my existing set of the storage tools. So at any time I'm having the high availability option or the fault tolerance option, so I'm not losing the connectivity at any point. So what are the new improvements in backup? We have the specific folders and files that we can select now. We can perform the incremental backup. Then we have the scheduled backup option, and also we can store the backup somewhere over the network. So you don't have the limitation now that you cannot take. So there was a challenge that in previous releases that you had to take the complete file, a complete server backup, which was a challenge. which is overcome with the help of this particular feature. You can now select the specific files and folders. You can select incremental. You can schedule the backup, and not only that, you can actually store the backup not only on your computer but some other partition or over the network. So this is all possible with the help of this new improved backup. Lastly, we will talk about the better together feature, wherein we talk about the direct access, branch cache, read-only DFS, and the serving of the virtual desktop, and protecting the mobile data. So when we talk about the direct access, as I told you that on the remote, on the clients who are on the way, when they want to connect to a remote computer, they often use this direct access feature, wherein they can connect to the corporate network seamless, always on secure connectivity without spending much of the time on the VPN. They can leverage the policy-based network and enable desktop management regardless of the location. So how it looks like? It looks like this. My client, which is running Windows 7, is connected to the DA server, which is on the edge of my corporate network through the internet. If you see this purple line, this is my tunnel, which is again the IPv6 connectivity to my IPv6 devices in your organization, or IPv4. So basically, if it uses the same IPsec encryption and authentication to cross-check. The next step is supports direct connectivity to IPv6 based internet resources. And in case if you're running the IPv4, we use the IPv4 via 64 translation, which translates my IPv6 based package to IPv4, and I can use my NAT/PT along with the IP HTTPS. So that is about the direct access. The next step is a branch cache, which is used for the reduced WAN link, completely transparent to the user, supports end-to-end encryption. There are two types of branch cache enhancements. So let's say how the branch cache works. If I'm downloading a file from my, let's say, Delhi office, I'm in Mumbai, and if my colleague tries to download a client to the same file from the Delhi office, my branch cache server tells me that client 1 is already having the same file with the same files that you are requesting. So you don't have to go from the Delhi office. So instead of using the WAN link, it uses the same high-speed local link. So same way, the other option is that in case you find that if I'm taking it from my colleague, there would be some burden on my client 1. So for heavy transfers, we can set up a dedicated server. So once my client 1 downloads a file, it will be stored on my dedicated server. And once it is stored on my dedicated server, if my client 2 is trying to request the file with the same hash, instead of getting it from my client 1's computer, it is going to copy the same file from this particular dedicated hosted cache. That means saving my download. So this hosted cache could be your file server. And the next step is your read-only DFS, wherein the content is pushed from the centralized location to the read-only replica of the DFS over here. So the downside is that the users will not be able to make any changes or corrupt the stored cache data. They can be just copied from one way. Now, these two, in my next webcast that I'm having it in sometime January or February timeframe, I'm having a dedicated session on Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 R2 better together features, where I'll be covering these features with complete demos. So lastly, before concluding, I'm having this last option, that is using the BitLocker. Now we have introduced a new option, what we call the BitLocker to go feature, wherein you can encrypt your entire hard drive, which was there in Windows Vista in 2008. With the release of Vista ST1, we have introduced the ability to encrypt the other partitions other than your system volume. And with this R2 feature, what you can do, you can actually encrypt your removable storage devices like your SD cards, pen drives, what we call the BitLocker to go feature. Now, before concluding, let me have a quick demo and then we will see the summary. So when I just plug in my pen drive on my computer, I get a prompt saying, oops, let me just plug in my card. Yeah, so it is detected and it is asking me for my password. So the moment I provide a password, if I try to access it without the password, I'm not able to see, sorry, secure card. It says the access is denied. But the moment I provide the password, I say unlock, it is going to give me access with the full data onto it, just like my VMs and a couple of files that I have. So this is available in Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7. So again, this is a security feature for your organization. So lastly, before concluding, Let's see what we have seen. We have seen the increased server consolidation with virtualization enhancement in R2. We have seen a greater administrative control with the new management tools. We have seen the rich web experience with IS7 on .NET server core based environment using with ASP.NET support and the .NET framework support on server core based operating system. So you can run those websites, ASP.NET websites on server core. Performance and scalability enhancement with 6256 logical processors on a host machine. Unprecedented synergy with client OS. Anywhere access using better together feature and the taking advantage to an enterprise class foundation to the next level with the help of these state-of-the-art tools provided in Windows. So that's all from my end. Let me just take a quick questions from your end so that we can conclude the session. And before that, while you enter your question, let me share you a desktop and I'll show you that we have just started our IT Managers portal specifically for you. So this is the link wherein you can visit the IT Managers portal. So if you just go to TechNet India, technet.microsoft.com India page, you will see the first tab which talks about the IT Managers. So over the time, you will have a lot of new sessions, upcoming sessions on this particular page dedicated to the IT managers like you. We have Penal Dave for SQL. We have Ravi Garg for licensing. You will also see MS Anand for infrastructure-based sessions in upcoming time. Prasanjit Bose for Microsoft Site Infrastructure. And this is all you will see in the upcoming months, the webcast for you as IT manager. So please visit and register on this portal to get up-to-date information about the resources that you will want to have. Now that's it all from my end. Thank you very much for joining in. Before joining in, leaving, let me just have a quick poll that did you enjoy today's session on Windows Server 2008? This will help us know more about how much you are interested in the event and how much you would like to attend such kind of events in the future, specifically for you as IT manager. And if we are able to convey our message efficiently to you about what Microsoft is doing and what Microsoft is providing you, state-of-the-art tools for you as IT manager can go and decide and help grow your organization efficiently. So I'll take the questions, so feel free to fire up any questions. So some of the questions that I got, that branch cache feature is available in Windows Server 2008. No, branch cache in the direct access is a feature which is a part of Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7 as a part of a better together feature. Is AD Administrative Center a feature that you need to install on 2008? No, the AD Administrative Center is a new feature available in Windows Server 2008 R2 only. It's not available in 2000. Regarding backups, so someone said that, so I cannot install Hyper-V on a bare metal, that is without requiring installing any OS. Not at all. We have one more edition of Hyper-V, what we call the Microsoft Hyper-V Server 2008 and Microsoft Hyper-V Server 2008 R2, which is released along with the 2008 R2. So Hyper-V Server R2 is a free release of the Hyper-V based virtualization from Microsoft. You just install it on a bare metal machine and you can just start developing deploying the virtual machines without needing to purchase any operating systems. Now there will be some limitations, but you can use the hardware assisted virtualization on that. Well, let me just say, what are the possibilities of an upgrade from 2003 to 2008 R2? Well, when you talk about the 2003 to 2008 R2, we do have the upgrade paths available from which edition to which edition. Also, we have, in case you want to migrate from 2003 to 2008, we have so many migration tools available, from migrating your roles like Active Directory, your DHCP roles, IP configuration. Lot of tools available on technet.microsoft.com for you to migrate from the 2003 to 2008 R2. So can you share a presentation with us? Once I'm done with the session, the presentation and the recording will be available for you for further viewing, so that you can download and evaluate and see the recordings again with all the demos in it. And also, let me just, you can just fire me all the queries. Let me share my contact again, so that if you want to send any queries, you can just visit my blog. Let me just go back to the first page, wherein you will get all my details. Well, thank you for the poll and thank you for the feedback. I've got tremendous feedback from you as IT manager. I hope you enjoyed the session, that how you can save costs, leverage the IT infrastructure benefits. And once again, thank you very much for joining me in this session. We will see you in the upcoming sessions that will be lined up for you as IT manager with the different IT infrastructure and the IT pro topics for you. Thank you all.